Howdy y'all, hope you guys are all doing well, I hope you guys are safe, and I hope you guys are healthy. My name is Josh and I absolutely love clothing, so if you're into clothing content, feel free to follow me here on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all my socials will be in the description down below. So today's video is going to be primarily on a certain category of items, and that's going to be on vintage items. Vintage has been an absolute buzzword for the past, I don't know, decade now, and I think for very good reason, but there is a lot of things that you should probably keep in mind when you are buying vintage items. So the question I want to answer today is, are vintage items actually better than modern iterations of clothing? Vintage items consist of things that are at least 20 years old to 99 years old. Anything past 99 years old is considered an antique. The first category that I wanted to bring up is vintage t-shirts. Vintage t-shirts have been absolutely huge. And personally, I would prefer to buy a vintage graphic tee as opposed to a modern graphic tee, but there are a lot of characteristics that can be introduced when a vintage version is brought up. And there have been a lot of people that are capitalizing on specifically vintage tees and specifically vintage band tees. But just to kind of illustrate my point here, this is a vintage tee that I purchased in Seattle on my trip, and I don't know if the camera's able to pick it up, but there is a nice fade to it. There is a single stitch construction over here on the sleeve. And one really big thing about vintage graphic tees specifically is the quality of prints. There's cracking, there's texture, there's sun fading. It is absolutely beautiful a lot of times, and if I can find this one on this shirt, there's like a date associated with the shirt as well. But vintage graphic tees are honestly awesome looking. There are a couple of caveats to vintage tees that are an issue. I mean, obviously it's really easy to take care of a vintage tee, just wash it just like how you would anything else. But with it being worn however many times by the previous owner, you are going to want to wash it and clean it and make sure that everything is, you know, nice and sanitary for you. And that goes for just about every vintage item that you could possibly buy out here. But there are some characteristics that are, you know, good, but don't really speak to the longevity of the item. I love vintage tees, but the type of vintage tees that I really love are really thin, and the texture is absolutely amazing. However, it becomes very brittle, and so you might not be able to get a whole lot of wear out of those tees, particularly very thin vintage tees, but for the time that you do have them, they're pretty amazing. So keep in mind that they may break down a little bit quicker over time. Another absolutely major component to buying vintage tees, and a lot of people really need to keep this in mind, especially sellers and buyers alike, is that sizing for vintage tees is all over the place. Standard sizing for the past decades are not the same as standard sizing today. And so when you're buying a vintage tee and the seller says, oh hey, it's marked a size large, it's marked a size extra large, medium, small, whatever it may be, keep in mind you're probably going to want to ask for measurements if they don't have it already listed on the actual posting. And so I would say make sure you get the pit to pit measurement as well as the length, and then you'll be able to make a judgment on whether or not you'll be able to wear this shirt. I bought so many shirts off of like secondhand sites, and unfortunately they just didn't work out for me. So yeah, definitely keep in mind sizing for vintage tees in the future if you're gonna buy some. Alright, so the next category that I want to talk about are pants, and I'm gonna lump like jeans as well as like work pants in here as well, but I think that the vintage versions of denim and workwear pants and just pants in general are actually better in the vintage version, because the modern denim and materials aren't as geared towards durability. And so just to kind of show this right here, this is a pair of vintage Levi's 505s, has paint on it, has distressing, has just so many amazing qualities to it, and honestly, you can't go wrong with a pair of vintage Levi's. The materials feel completely different if you have a pair specifically that is in the 90s or prior, and I wish I could describe it a little bit better through the camera for you guys, but if you just compare a modern pair of Levi's, it's 100% cotton, and then a pair that's from the 90s or prior, the hand feel is completely different. But I know that vintage Levi's that are prior to the 90s can command a little bit higher of a price point. But if you can find some like really good deals, especially a lot of vintage stores have been really good about being able to tell you when this pair of jeans was from. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're shopping around. There is so many pairs of vintage Levi's. You don't have to buy the ones that are like excess of $100, although they might be the best curated ones or have the best distressing or whatever. With some tender love and care and you know, you just simply wearing the pair of jeans, the jeans will eventually show whatever you do in them, which is why I absolutely love just kind of like this pair of jeans right here. I've been wearing these for probably 2 years now, 3 years, something like that, and they're just kind of like my throwaway jeans if I'm gonna go out and I know that I'm gonna do just kind of whatever, maybe be outdoors. This is my go-to pair of blue jeans. Now, just like with t-shirts, there is a inherent issue that comes with the sizing. Sizing is very difficult for some jeans, and there's no really great way to kind of all encompass exactly what you could buy out there. If you're ever in doubt, don't trust the tag sizes because, you know, it could have changed because of shrinkage or whatever it may be. So always ask for measurements, particularly when it comes to pants. You're gonna wanna look at the waist measurement as well as the inseam and rise. The waist measurement is going to be from here to here. Inseam is going to be from the bottom of the crotch all the way down to the bottom hem on the inside of the leg, and then the rise is going to be from here all the way to the bottom of the crotch. When in doubt, ask for measurements. So I also wanted to go ahead and show you guys another pair of vintage Carhartt pants that I have, and this one is so nice. The fading, the distressing patterns kind of right around the thigh area, the knee blowout. There is a tear around the pocket that I had repaired myself, but just the simple characteristics that are just added to the pants over time just look absolutely amazing. Vintage pants, I think, are better than modern iterations of jeans and work pants. The next category of clothing that I wanted to go ahead and talk about is actually a pretty easy one to decipher whether vintage is better or not, and that's military wear. Military wear is a whole heck of a lot better worn vintage in a streetwear or fashion context than modern military. Modern military has a very specific uniform look to it, which isn't a bad thing, but for streetwear purposes, vintage military is definitely the way to go because a lot of streetwear actually draws from a lot of vintage military silhouettes. Alright, and a piece I would really like to show you guys an example of vintage military wear is this right here. This is not that old, it's from the early 2000s, I believe, and this is one of my absolute favorite jackets. It is a bomber jacket with a collar here. I forget exactly what the name of the jacket is, but this is one of my favorite jackets because of the shape of it. It's very cropped, fits me absolutely perfectly. I bought it at Savers for, I think it was $6, and this has been with me for a while. One of my absolute favorites, and it is crazy to think that things from the early 2000s can be considered vintage now. And to kind of also quickly go over workwear is another form of vintage. Workwear is great. It looks so cool. You look like a farmer. It's so much fun. A lot of it's very earth tone heavy, but vintage workwear is really, really, really cool, and I think that vintage workwear is better than modern workwear, but it is a lot more expensive. Like if you get like French workwear, like jackets or pants, they are so expensive. I think I actually have a French workwear jacket that I can show you. So this is a French workwear jacket, I believe from the 50s. I did a little bit of patching myself. These are so very, very cool. The material it's made of is moleskin, and it just feels great, it looks great, fits great on me, and I was lucky enough to get this for like, I don't know, I've had this for a while. I think I spent like $60 on it. Nowadays they go for quite a bit more. I've seen like anywhere from in like the hundreds, which is kind of crazy, but vintage workwear is really, really nice to have. It's just people really do mark up that price because they are pretty rare to come by. The next topic that I wanted to talk about is vintage jewelry. I don't really own a lot of vintage jewelry. I don't look for vintage jewelry very often, but this one I think is great. My brother buys vintage jewelry all the time, and I think they can look awesome it's usually a whole lot cheaper than like modern jewelry, or if you bought jewelry from a retailer, which is great. However, there is a question of how sanitary it can be. I would very highly suggest that, for one, before you buy vintage jewelry, definitely make sure that you're aware of the metal markings. Metal markings will kind of denote, I don't even know if that's what's really called, but metal markings are like kind of denote what materials are put into the actual piece of jewelry, so that you can tell if you're actually getting silver, gold, whatever it may be. And so read up on your metal markings, as well as make sure that if you buy vintage jewelry, get it professionally cleaned. If you're gonna put it on your body like an earring, like through your ear, I would want it like very, very, very thoroughly, professionally clean. But the benefit to buying vintage jewelry is that it's usually pretty cheap. Next up is buying vintage designer versus modern designer. This one is a really difficult topic to kind of all encompass, but I would say, and maybe other people would disagree with me, but I would actually say that modern designer is better than vintage designer. Yes, there are the iconic things that have, come to popularity in the past, saying like buying vintage Helmut Lang, buying vintage Raf Simons compared to modern Raf Simons, but simply based off of the advancements in technology, as well as the more exaggerated silhouettes that can exist today, just due to improved techniques, I think that modern designer has more potential than vintage designer. Vintage designer is great, but there's no changing vintage designer. Like, it's already been in the past. That's what things today are based on, maybe, but it's already in the past. Modern designer is sometimes pushes the envelope for what fashion is and what trends can be. And my best example of that is, like, look at Balenciaga. If you look at vintage Balenciaga compared to modern Balenciaga, two pretty much completely different brands. They are able to do more luxurious things today as opposed to back then, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Are you guys going to agree with me on this one? Modern designer is better than vintage designer. And the last category of vintage that I wanted to kind of bring up to you guys is vintage furniture and houseware, really. Vintage furniture looks absolutely amazing sometimes. Furniture is by far the most expensive out of like the vintage things that you can buy, unless it's a true like antique. But vintage furniture is awesome if you can find it. But it is the most, how do I word this? It's the items that you have to put the most work in. Like, if it is a vintage, say, chair, couch, something you sit on, it might need to be a reupholstered, which is expensive. It might need to be cleaned very thoroughly, professionally, which is very expensive. And so if you're someone who's looking to fill your house or apartment or whatever you live in, with vintage furniture, then you're going to need to put more effort and work and money into vintage furniture to make it, sanitary, pretty much. But there is so many opportunities for people to make more interesting and unique living situations with vintage furniture. Something I really want to emphasize, and something that a lot of vintage fans will kind of say, and I completely agree with, is that you simply cannot replicate the amount of detail and unique characteristics that you pick up over time, over decades and decades of wear. And so I think that's really a big drawing point for a lot of people who love vintage. And so, just to conclude, is vintage better than modern items? In some cases, yes. Particularly, usually clothing cases, yes. And in other cases, no, like designer. I don't know if you guys agree with me. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below, or DM me on Instagram if you feel so inclined. I appreciate you guys watching this video.